Welcome everyone to another Into the West video. My name is Charles. With me today are Richard, and we have our friend Stephen. Welcome back.
Good to be back.
So today we're going to be talking about the magical powers. We're going to be doing a tier list of every single magical power. Yeah, so as we know, there have been some changes to how magic works. Generally, it's been toned down, I'd say, a little bit, and some of the things are different. Like, for example, the channel version of each spell is now gone.
It's not necessarily that all magic has gone down, though, because as you've noted with the heroic channeling, I've actually found some casters are actually better now than they were beforehand. Because especially if they have not a ton of will and they had a hard time casting their spells beforehand, as we'll see when we go through these, being able to force a six, that's a strong tool for casting. And it definitely balances out some of the other nerfs that I really thought were going to neuter Magic when they first released the rules.
Already, I've probably already seen on average more heroic channels being called than in the older edition. You can argue certain spells like Blinding Light back then was very commonly channeled, but it was very, very select few. But now there's a lot more reason to cast it on your big casters and your small casters.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to say one thing before we jump into the tier list. There are spells that are no longer in the game, and I just want to shout them out. So we have one is Refreshing Song. We don't know the profile for Tom Bombadil yet, but this was his spell, and it's not in the main rules. Sap Will is gone, Shatter is gone, and Shroud of Shadows is gone. So I'll miss Shroud of Shadows and Shatter being a Moria player.
I think most of those spells people will be generally pleased aren't in the game anymore. they they were like very ruinous things. If anyone has ever been shattered before, a 50-point shaman just absolutely neutering your 200-point hero. No, I think people are okay with that.
Yeah, Sap Will as well. That's just gone on all the ring wraiths. Well, let's jump into the tier list. Okay, so all of the spells are listed at the bottom here, and just to explain what the colors mean. So the ones with the golden border are new magical powers for this edition of the game, and the ones that are red are exhaustion spells. Okay, so we're going to start at the really top with Aura of Command.
The big change is that there's currently no profiles that have this spell. So it's a theoretical spell at the moment.
Yeah. And I'm guessing it wouldn't be 2+ anymore. It's looking like 3+. That would be my guess on most casters.
I'll be interested to see who's getting this spell because they didn't remove it, but we don't have White Council. Saruman had it before.
Círdan had
Who
it.
else? Círdan had it. Yeah.
Celeborn.
Celeborn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gone.
But then we know there's an armored Celeborn coming.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe they'll give him that back. This is one of the spells that I view as like a very useful fix for a hole in your army. There's some armies that just absolutely love having Aura of Command in some matchups. And I remember back when we could make alliances, I mean, you were oftentimes trying to figure out like how to get a Saruman or someone with this ability into your army. It was just very powerful. However, I don't think this spell it's not a completely broken ability that's just going to like wipe out major heroes and kind of win you the game all on its own. So to me, Aura of Command is like a perfect example of what a good Valor spell is. It's something that I will very often cast if I have it. It's very important for some armies, but it's not like completely game defining or army defining.
I think I can agree with that. It's definitely very, very good. It's very nice to have in like the best of lists, and then if you can get into a low courage list, then it's absolutely amazing.
Okay, next we have Aura of Dismay. So this one has changed to, instead of aura of friendly models causing terror, it's just enemy models have a -1 when they make courage tests.
Yeah, Círdan still has this, but yeah, it works the other way around. It's probably worse than before. I mean, it works completely different. You can argue there's different perks because, this helps when your opponent breaks, whereas it didn't before, but I just think overall it's not as useful.
I would also say that because you can't ally as much now this spell, you're not necessarily matching it up with terror walls anymore. And if Aura of Dismay is not impacting rolls all the time. Like it's only mattering for your heroes or if your opponent's already broken, which is already a pretty good situation for you. It's it's not that powerful. I would have said the old Art of Dismay, like giving your guys terror, is extremely powerful and had an impact in almost every single game. But this version, I have cast it before once my opponent breaks to make some of their stuff run away, and that's good. But honestly, I was probably already winning that game. So I feel like this spell, if you combine it with a terror wall and you didn't already have Harbinger of Evil, or maybe you're stacking it with Harbinger of Evil, it'd be very strong. But on the current casters that it has, for me, this is not a priority spell at all.
I kind of agree with Steven here. I personally would maybe even go minor on this one.
I would go minor. Yeah. Because for me, a minor spell is a spell that is very situational, and I wouldn't use it in most games. And I think that's the case, or it wouldn't change the outcome of most games. And I think that's what this falls under. If you have it, maybe you pull it out in certain niche cases, but you're not picking a caster for Aura of Dismay.
Okay, next we have Banishment. Deals a wound to a spirit model, and then if it's a cav model, then you choose the rider or the mount.
I guess outside of what the White Council, you would rarely see this, where the Council, Galadriel can basically banish anything, which is really nice. Well, I will say it was probably a bit more common in the last edition, just because of the meta of how common like stuff like the Witch King and other ring rates are. From what I've seen now, that is definitely not the case. There's a couple lists where the Witch King is strong in, but he's not going to be everywhere. Yeah, I think it definitely became even more niche.
And all the named ring wraiths are gone now. This is just not a spell that you need. If you have very specifically the target that it's designed to kill, great. Otherwise, nope. It's not even effective against some of the things. Like I see a lot of Balrogs, but the Balrog has a lot of will to resist and it has 10 wounds. You're just going to be banishing it for eternity. It's not going to work out.
Yeah, I'd say the most efficient use of it would be against like Warriors of the Dead. But how often are you going to have that at matchup, right? Specific matchup?
Well, you're going to see them more this edition, I think.
That's true. That's
That's
true.
Yeah, that's probably the best use of it.
I'd say this one's also minor. It's pretty situational, right?
Yeah, this is the definition of a minor to me.
Okay, next we have Black Dart. So
Oh,
Black
how the
Dart,
mighty have fallen.
for those people
Yeah.
wondering if Rider can resist for the mount or not, they keep going back and forth, but now the Rider can again.
And that is a huge nerf to this spell.
Yeah.
Because if it was just strength 6, but you could still take out a horse, because he'd still wound the horse very efficiently, that would be fine. It would still have play. But the fact that they can just resist this, oh my gosh. I mean, you're casting on a 5+. Ooh. It's the kind of situation where having a direct damage spell like this can do things that you couldn't normally do and get you out of holes that you couldn't normally get out of. But this spell is not nearly as powerful as it used to be. And you're going to have to get lucky, really. I mean, this is just, it's almost an Hail Mary or dump all 3 of your might territory to make sure you're getting it off.
I will say you probably will still see this spell just because on things like the Ring Wraith, this is kind of their damage spell. It's not like they have Sorcerous Blast or Flameburst or anything like that.
To make a small argument for this edition's Black Dart, it can be slightly more reliable, where last edition you're sometimes throwing 3 or 4 will for that 5+. Now you can spend 1 might and then 1 will and you'll get that 6, right? Just due to the new change
and then
of
you roll
casting.
it to the wound, Charles.
Yeah.
6 is just not enough. But I mean, you're right. But the argument for Black Dart being so consistent in the past was you had enough will to make sure you could cast it and enough might to make sure that you could wound it. And you can't do that anymore. You have to use your might and your will to cast it. And then you just gotta pray.
And one more thing, it's 6 inches.
Oh yeah. Ooh, Shadow Lord style, right? Wasn't he 6 inches in the last edition?
Yeah, it was some
Yeah.
wraiths 6 inches, some wraiths 12.
Yep.
So what are you guys thinking? Somewhere in the middle?
In my mind, this is a fortitude spell now. Like you will use it, but I'm
Yeah.
not happy about it.
Yeah, probably maybe on the lower side of fortitude.
Okay, next we have Bladewrath. Once you cast it on a friendly model, all their strikes are resolved at strength 6, regardless of modifiers.
So can I rate this based on the expectation that it will work on the Dragon Emperor still? Because the best use of this spell is casting on the Dragon Emperor, and then it makes his 3 attacks strength 6, and then the 6 attacks from his Palanquin strength 6. So you actually were getting a ridiculous amount of value in one shotting. However, we don't have the Dragon Emperor profile yet, so that specific use case isn't around. However, I think this still can be quite a powerful ability. Strength 6 is a big difference from strength 4 in terms of the math of like wounding. And if you're facing a lot of defense 6, it's especially good, but even higher stuff, like you're trying to punch through, you can get a lot of strength 6 strikes from this.
The effect itself is kind of middle of the road, in my opinion. It was just on one of those like smaller, like shaman casters. I don't think I would take a caster just to be able to bring this spell. It most likely wouldn't be worth it for me.
I think that's a fair point. You can still strike or combat with it, which is very good to combat with your Bladewrath because then you can get a lot more value with it. And I guess perhaps it will still combo with chariots if you're playing with legacy models. But ultimately, it's one of those things where you want your caster to have one great spell and then maybe one good spell. And this would be the good or the support spell, not the main reason that you're taking it.
I think it's better than Black Dart.
Yeah, I like it better than Black Dart. It's either bottom of Valor or higher in Fortitude for me.
Being in Valor feels a little bit wrong, so I'm gonna put it in Fortitude for now. Okay, next we have Call Winds. Call Winds now is you get blown back D3 plus 3 inches, so it's more consistent.
And
This ability is sneaky good.
yeah, it was a bit of a meme last edition because it was only on the Stormcaller, but it's quite good now. With the changes to Sorcerous Blast, I don't believe anything can really knock you back anymore, especially out of combat. And this is one of the only ways to do it.
I mean, this is just such a strong control spell because you're also knocking them prone, and you can do it to people engaged in combat. Like that's just brutal. If someone's got a really expensive hero, you can just go pew pew, keep blasting him back. And I don't believe there's any restrictions on size, right? So you can hit monsters and just wallop them back and forth. And it also casts very efficiently, which is also something to really keep in mind because it's on Kurdan now, right? It's his new premier spell, and I think it's very strong.
Yeah, blowing an enemy model out of combat is a great defensive ability because I can see it being really frustrating for an opponent who's trying to get their hero in. It's
I
hard.
mean,
It's hard to say this one where this one would go. I think I want to
in
put it
this
at the
edition,
top, but
this is
yeah,
like bottom of legend for me in this edition. That the efficiency of casting, the fact that you get it on free will heroes, and just the level of control that you get from being able to direct where they go, and how far they can go. I mean, you can really tie down a model that's much more expensive than your caster with this.
so you blow them back minimum 4 inches. And for a standard 6 inch move model, for them to be knocked prone, getting up and moving only half, it's going to take them at least one more turn to get back to where they were. So you're stalling them by at least one turn.
I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, there is some restrictions where they stop if they hit another model. So if you really want to hit a certain model, you might not get the distance that you want from it. But like Steven said, at least you get the knock prone, which is the most important part.
So if they're spear supporting their hero, for example, you can just call wins them into the spear support, right? And then there's still in combat and prone. I mean, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, they would be able to resist that, but yeah, for sure, that's an application. Yeah, I do like that you can cast this on monsters. We're already seeing a lot more monsters these days.
Yep.
Yeah, legend. I do think it's either legend or like valor. It's right there. If it was a more common spell, then it might be oppressive. But
Yeah, yeah. You give this to Gandalf, I feel like it's a whole different situation.
it's better than anything Gandalf can cast nowadays.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's going to end at bottom of Legend, but I think it is a tier above Aura of Command.
All right, next we have Blinding Light. I think it's the same, except there's some restrictions now where if there's a piece of impassable terrain, like a wall or building directly between the caster and between the model and the source of the light that you're trying to shoot, then the light doesn't benefit them, which makes sense.
The real change here is that you can't channel it and leave it up in perpetuity. You have to cast it each turn. And they also nerfed the casting values on this, so it's much less of a sure thing. It's a 4 up now in Gladriel instead of a 2, for example. So it is very noticeably worse when you play with it. However, that being said, the state of the game right now, the 6 scenarios that we have, the balance of the list that we have, Blinding Light is really powerful. I don't know about you guys in facing Dale armies or Mirkwood Rangers or all the different shooting armies that you're deploying all the way across the board from. If you could get Blinding Light, it is going to help you a lot in a tournament set. For me, this is just like an Aura of Command. It's a powerful, helpful ability that will make your list function against a certain archetype of list very well. But in some percentage of games, you won't need it at all.
But do you think it's still good enough where if your army has it, you're guaranteed or almost guaranteed to win the shoot war?
Well, let's see. The armies that can have it it's Gandalf the White armies. I would say those do not win the shooting war, generally speaking, but it buys time for them to engage properly, like Riders of Aemir or Top of the Wall, or Lothlorien. And I would say that Lothlorien does, in fact, actually win the shooting war if you have Blinding Light. In any case, it's an ability that counters a lot of strong meta choices right now. So for me, that's a Valar.
I think I would agree with that, and I would still put it ahead of Aura of Command.
Yep.
I think just because, if you hit a terror army, it doesn't feel like an insta loss compared to
Right.
right now, if you come up against like a Dale army with no Blinding Light. It's rough.
Yeah, if you're a D5 army right now, oof, oof,
How about a D3 army?
that stays in the case. But
All right, next we have Blessing of the Valor. The person that casts on regains one fate. So
I've never seen this spell cast.
no, no. This to me is in the tier of spells that pan out profiles and I never use. This is the kind of thing that you would only use if somehow you had lost a point of fate to shooting and there was no one that you could target with any other abilities. So for me, this is not a very good spell.
yeah, in theory, it seems like it could be useful, but you just have so many better spells that.
And it's not like it's automatic. You're paying will to have a chance of restoring one fate. I mean, and then a fate isn't a guaranteed save of a wound either. It's just a very weak spell.
We'll put it
You
at the bottom.
you can channel Blessing of the Valor
Oh,
to guarantee a 50% shot at getting a win.
yes. Desperate times to do that. Ooh.
Okay, we have Chill Soul. Chill
Old
Soul.
reliable for Sauron.
Yeah, Sauron, the Necromancer.
Deal instant wound is good. It's very
Yep.
rare, but yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably one of the go-to spells in Sauron's repertoire. So, legend maybe.
How can you not? It's a defining spell on like the most expensive casters in the game for a reason. It's extremely strong. Just reach out, wipe someone out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think like without it, Sauron is probably unplayable.
I would agree. It's what Black Dart, wishes it was.
Yeah, it's just so versatile, right? Threaten like leader VPs, threaten targets trying to assassinate, threaten objectives, can do a lot of things. And from a distance too.
I mean, if you put this spell on like a 120-point caster with a free point of will every turn, it would just be so ridiculous. So that's kind of how you know. The fact that they have to gate this behind the biggest, most powerful heroes in the game, it tells you it's a very strong spell.
Now, is it better than Call Winds?
In my mind, yes. If you gave Kurdan Chill Soul. I mean, people would want that over Cauldrons. Just be
Chill,
dealing death out there. Oh my gosh.
Chill Soul Curadan.
You're like the Legolas of last edition, just deadly shotting everyone.
Yeah, next we have Curse, which I think still the same as last edition. The target loses one fate.
Curse is we have Chill Soul at home. It is not nearly as powerful. But it's better than Blessing of Valor. It's better to take a fate point than to give it.
Yeah,
That's all I can really say.
yeah, it's better than the worst one.
I mean, you're spending resources to take away a 50-50 chance from your opponent. Like, you don't accomplish anything by doing this. It sets you up so that maybe a future play you can accomplish something, but by itself, it doesn't do anything. So,
This is the spell that I've often heard like on forums and such where people are like, "Ooh, this is a sneaky good one to have," and people are excited to see it on was it the Shadow of Rudar?
yeah.
I don't know if he still has it, but yeah, yeah, I don't see it in actual practice. It just these sneaky situations never seem to arise, I guess, where you need to cast it over another spell.
Necromancer casts a Chill Soul on a 5 or a Curse on a 4. Which one do you want to cast?
Well, you see, if he casts Chill Soul, then their opponent might use their fate to try to resist it. So, you don't want them to do that. You better curse them to take it away.
Checkmate.
I know there's like sneaky play where you could do a combo with Mirkwood Spiders, where you're supposed to use fate to avoid being paralyzed, but you're taking the fate away so they're more easy to paralyze. But
Big
yeah,
brain.
that's very corner case. So are we going to put it at the same level as Blessing?
No, I think it's minor. It's better than Blessing. Independent is like truly you will never cast this. And people do cast Curse, and it does like a little bit. But for me, it's like bottom of minor.
Fair enough.
There is a big gap between Aura of Dismay and Banishment and Curse, to be honest. I know they're side by side with each other, but
But Black Dart and Bladewrath are much more useful than Aura of Dismay, in my
yeah,
mind.
for sure.
I wouldn't hate putting Curse in Independent.
We
But
can put it there. It with its friend Blessing the Valor. We just don't care about fate here.
yeah, viewers, let us know. Are there any fans here of the spell Curse, and have you used it in any games where it's kind of pulled it off for you?
We're gonna get a big, huge paragraph comment guaranteed. Someone saying like Curse is like the best spell in the game. We're just missing something.
He took out a fate on a Rohan hero, and then the Horse Lord couldn't go off, and then he was dismounted, and then the rider broke his neck or something. Yeah, something epic.
So good.
Okay, next we have Compel.
My favorite spell from the old edition. How they've neutered my boy. I will say that it's still good, but yeah, it was unreal before.
Yeah, that's really what it is. It went from like the spell that was cast the most probably in all games combined to one that you'll see a lot less frequently. But it's still really strong. Moving your opponent's models is still really strong.
It's less of a okay, you make a single positional mistake and you get punished by you
You
potentially
lose the
lose
game
the game.
immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
To now, yes, like you'll probably have to burn some resources to get out of the situation, but it's not as bad, which I do admit it's probably a good change. And it's so good that even with all the glow ups that Gandalf got, I don't rate him as highly as some other people because he lost Compel, which is really, really sad because I feel like with the glow ups and if he kept Compel, then I'd be like, okay, now we're cooking.
Compel would be really good on his list because he'd just bring people out and then smash them on his horse. So in summary, Compel is still really strong.
Do you think it loses its legend status? Because it was definitely legend before.
For me, no. I mean, at the highest level of play, being able to move your models is just like the best ability you can have. It does so much. It's so versatile. You can block troops. You can move them out of position. You can fight them. You can move guys off of objectives. You can make them drop objects. You can make them put on the ring. I mean, there's just so much that you do with Compel. It's just a jack of all trades Swiss Army knife that you will use many times a game, every game, if you have it.
On certain, so Compel used to be always one higher cast value than Transfix on a caster's profile. On certain profiles now it's the same. Like for generic Wingwraith, they're
Yeah.
both the same cast value. So in that sense, you don't suffer a penalty for choosing it over Transfix. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, for me, I would put this after Chill Soul and above Call Winds in Legend.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that. In my mind, I thought it would have dropped more, but yes, looking at the other spells that we've put down so far, I'm like, yeah, it is still up there.
Because I think previously when Compel like neutered your target, that was great for assassinations, but that wasn't the only reason you would use Compel. Sometimes you just pulled a troop out so that you could charge a hero in, right? In that sense, that hasn't changed at all. So
Yep. Or
certain
send a
uses,
banner running, or send their cav hero sprinting off into the backfield. There's
yeah,
just so many uses for
yeah. It's just the assassination use has gone down. Okay, next we have Collapse Rocks.
it.
Wait, did this not get a buff? I feel like it did.
It did in strength. It's now strength 7.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, last edition it was introduced and I didn't see it used even once.
So I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm a geologist. So I have often made the argument. It says the caster could crack rock underfoot. Everything's on top of rocks, guys. You can crack rock underfoot everywhere. So, you just got to get the TO to agree that you can cast collapse rocks everywhere on the map. And then it's a great spell.
Yeah.
And, I submitted to TO. I had a good geologic paper about the geology of Middle Earth to kind of demonstrate this point to them. But I was loudly booed and called a nerd, and I did not cast Collapse Rocks. So this spell I've never seen cast. I don't think anyone even remembers that it exists. You'd have to like go into the game specifically thinking like, this is the game I'm gonna cast Collapse Rocks, and then like maybe use your Compel on a different turn if you had it to set it up. But like realistically, if you're not playing on a board that's specifically designed to allow you to use Collapse Rocks, you're never going to use this because you can't.
My argument against you, even though you are a geologist, is that the caster that it's on is Gandalf the Grey, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he lost Compel, like we just talked about. So you don't have that opportunity cost there. And Sorcerous Blast, we haven't gone to it yet, but it's much worse. And arguably, it doesn't do the old Sorcerous Blast. You would knock back and do a lot
Mm-hmm.
more like knocking combats to the ground. So it was like almost strictly better. But at this point, it's not. And yes, I think the biggest con is just remembering that it's a spell because it was so, you not used last edition. But I think now, if you do, why not get the extra string? And yes, like we're memeing, you're memeing about how like the whole ground is rock. But I would say even if there is like one of those GW ruin pieces, I would argue if anyone is like within that, I think you actually have a legitimate strong argument that someone within that ruins is within rock. And if an objective is set up within there, or if it's like Fog of War and people are in that objective, it's a niche use, but it's a use.
60% of the time, it works every time.
You should remember that you forget a lot of the times that this spell exists. Other people also forget that this spell exists. So now that it's buffed to not only strength 7, but it also knocks prone and dismounts cavalry, you can pull this out at a tournament and just take a hero off his horse or something.
You
I
think you'll give the game away by starting the game by going through and meticulously pointing out every single point on the map that is a rock? Like
if
no
any,
particular reason, but this is a rock, and this is a rock, and this is a rock, and this is made of rock. And
hey, if you
worry
do
about
that, it will suddenly become a zoning strategy. Watch all his heroes like avoid all like the rock terrain.
maybe I should do that whether I have collapse rocks or not in my list. Just so I think I do. Just put the fear into them of this very powerful spell. The strength 7 and knock prone is no joke. Easily avoided by your opponent.
I guess my pitch here was that to try to stave it off the independent tier. I think it's firmly in probably minor or low
Yeah,
altitude.
I say
Yeah.
minor. It feels like banishment to me, where if it lines up properly, it can be really helpful, but it won't line up. very often.
It's so map dependent because on a Khazad-dûm board, the entire ground is a rock, right? It's all stone.
But it's pretty
Yeah.
good.
Well, that's just like playing elves in, woodland maps,
That's right.
which is very, very common. So, no one can complain about that.
Or my favorite, Army of the Dead in a full deep water map. Very fun, very strong.
Okay.
So the question is, would you rather have Banishment or Collapse Rocks? I would say.
I'd rather have Banishment, personally.
Okay.
I've seen Banishment cast. I've never seen Collapse Rocks cast.
I'll trust a geologist on this one.
Yeah, don't collapse the rocks. They're beautiful.
Moving on to Flameburst. It's been changed slightly, so its target suffers 1 strength 6, and then it also specifies that if they're immune to fire-based attacks, then they're immune to this magical power. So it doesn't have the set ablaze thing anymore.
I think formerly on Kardish and Saruman it was 6 inches for the flame burst, and now on Saruman it's 12 inches.
12 inches big over 6, and that is a strong argument to maybe have it above Black Dart. Also, Flame Burst hits the model, so I think it hits both the mount and the rider, whereas Black Dart you have to choose the rider or the mount. So I would say Flame Burst is basically Black Dart, but slightly better because it has further range and it hits both. And is the only model that's immune to fire-based attacks the Balrog?
Smog.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big downside. But all of the limitations that we've discussed for Black Dart apply to Flame Burst. Strength 6 is not very high. If it's been to cast it, then you might have to spend might to wound, but it has a place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's right above Black Dart if it is quickly better.
I'd put it right above Black Dart. Is Smog immune to fire?
Yeah, Smog is.
Thank God.
Yeah, they finally fixed it.
Hey, Dragon better have that. I swear. I'd be very upset. Did Dragon get legacied?
No.
Nope.
Yes. The fire retardant battle group. We're really going to nerf Flameburst to the ground.
Next, we have Fury. Yeah, so I think Armies of Middle-earth will have has all the Fury profiles, all the shamans and stuff like that, but essentially it's the same. It's just that you don't have the channel version as an option anymore. It's just the auto pass courage within 6.
And the channel version was a trap anyway, so it's probably actually beneficial that you won't be tricked into using your might to channel that.
Yeah, but now that you can spend a might and guarantee the 6, you don't need to do the 2 will cast Fury and then risk rolling a 1 or 2 on both and failing.
Right.
Who knows? It could be 4+.
Yeah.
Fury is like Aura of Command. It fills essentially the exact same role. It's slightly worse because it's race specific, or
Faction.
I guess we don't know. It's X right now. Could be faction specific, but it's essentially the exact same thing as Aura of Command.
Passing courage is still very good.
Yeah, I'd probably put it right, still same tier, and then right behind.
Yep, that's what I would do.
Okay, next we have Drain Courage.
So I think effectively it is the same thing. Obviously, courage has kind of changed, so it's worded a bit differently.
Do you think this spell is slightly worse because some of the things that you do for courage were moved to intelligence?
Yeah.
It doesn't encompass as much.
I think the bigger nerf is just that Black Numenorians aren't in the game yet. Terror Wall armies are less easy to obtain because Aura of Dismay doesn't do it anymore either. I mean, that's the real nerf here. So.
Well, I would also say another big nerf is the casting. A lot of them went 1 or 2 higher. So I don't even know if I would want to be throwing 4+ Drain Courages. Like 2+ just seemed like a nice little harass before, you wanted to get to your big spells when like the lines clash. I mean, 4+ is tough because you're going to have to spend like actual resources to consistently get this off. So I don't know.
It's moved from something that you can potentially take down a big hero who used to have like a courage 5. You could bring them down to now it's like you're targeting trolls or stuff that are courage 3, and you wouldn't even bother going after the higher courage guys. I mean, there's still value there, and if it was a low courage model and that mattered, and then you can just take them down to a meme level, sure, but it's nowhere near as consistent or as useful. I mean, this is just not a spell I can see myself using. I also don't like spells that require you to cast them multiple times before they really start having a game effect, because especially with like Drain Courage, I mean, the average hero has multiple will to resist. So if they really care, they can resist a Drain Courage, and then maybe you need 2 or 3 more Drain Courages to go up. That is just almost never worth it in a game to be spending all of your time casting a spell like this. So I really think Drain Courage might be useful in the specific scenario that you're taking a former Courage 3 and turning it to a Courage 2. So I guess a 7 to an 8 or something now. But outside of that, that's like it.
I mean, there's also the scenario where your army has a lot of Blades of the Dead, and you're trying to bring it down, the courage down by 1, so that the bulk of your troops or a certain hero will wound them on a +1, right?
But again, that's probably targeting a big hero or something. Otherwise, it's
Right.
not really worth it, right?
Wouldn't you rather just transfix them? Because by the time their courage is low enough, I mean, they might have killed 7, 8 models. The opportunity cost makes the spell not worth it. Now, if you put this on like a 30-point model, 3 plus, and you could spam them out, it would be a lot more powerful. But when it's on a giant premier caster, not worth it.
I mean, even the budget wraiths aren't that budget anymore.
Yeah.
No.
I almost think this should be in minor and maybe either, I don't know, if before or after Aura of Dismay. Because they have different applications. To me, they're both kind of niche. Maybe below Aura of Dismay.
I'd say below because I cast Aura of Dismay and I will not cast Drain Courage. I just know I won't.
Charles, any disagreements there?
The casting values going up by a lot is big, because one of the reasons why you used to spam them is because they got off so easily, and you just throw them on a hero when you have multiple casters. But yeah, now it just doesn't seem worth it.
A lot of times now you have to look through the lens of, for a 4+ spell, would I think it was worth to heroic channel this? And this fails that test.
Okay, now we have Enchanted Blades. This one, the target may reroll all fail to wound.
Yeah, we're seeing some different casters with it though.
Yeah,
Witch
that's what
King.
we're all thinking about here, right?
Yeah.
It's a specific blade being enchanted, a Morgul blade, because you can now take this on the Witch King, which is a lot more interesting.
Even if he just does it on a normal strike on the Fell Beast, that is pretty deadly. It was always like a solid second tier kind of power. You would never take a hero just to get access to Enchanted Blades, but it was always nice to have, and you did see it quite often, in certain games.
Yeah, very handy on heroes that are stuck at strength 4 with no modifiers or something like that. That helps them so much.
So there's obvious parallels between this and Bladewrath. How do you guys kind of compare the two? Both cast on a hero to kind of increase their wounding potential.
Well, I think in this case, obviously, Enchanted Blades knocks Bladewrath off by far on the Witch King, right? Because if you're taking the Fell Beast,
It probably depends on like what your base starting strength value is. Like obviously, if you're a higher strength or more wounding hero, Bladewrath is completely useless. But
okay,
if you were a weak dude, then you wouldn't care about enchanting blading if you're still wounding on 6s by 4s.
yeah. So I mean, the standard hero on strength 4 going up to strength 6 is essentially +1 to wound, right? So I guess it would be the math between +1 to wound better or rerolls to wound better on the different defense levels. I know the math changes depending on what the defense is, but
Yep.
yeah, I guess it kind of depends on what you're coming up against.
We'll simplify it. You enchanted blade on your Witch King and you Bladewrath on your Dragon Emperor. Perfect.
Right.
I will give Enchanted Blades the nod over Bladewrath because of the combo with Heroic Strength, and that is sick. You can really wallop people if you need to.
Yeah, I think I'm good with that.
Okay, next we have Enrage Beast.
This one's a tricky one to evaluate.
So we know that in this edition, models are split into unit types, right? So instead of saying specifically which kind of models can be enraged, it's just beast models.
And it automatically wounds now, as opposed to just doing a strength hit.
What stats does it boost?
By
It
value,
gives-
strength, and attacks.
Okay,
And then
so
the
no
gains
more.
they gain fearless.
Oh, so that's a slight buff. They gain
Yeah.
fearless
Yep.
instead of +2 courage.
This one is tricky because you have to have beasts in your list to make it work. Like, we haven't seen the list yet where this works, but Enrage Beast in the previous edition, and it hasn't changed a whole lot, was an extremely powerful spell that was a marquee part of a very powerful list that had to be nerfed. And I think actually the buffs to fight value could potentially be more powerful now since it's harder to strike up or more likely to be able to kill someone. I mean, when you combine this with various beasts that have movement shenanigans or stuff like that, you can just one-shot heroes with this ability. Like, it's very powerful. But obviously, you got to have beasts to make it work. So it's not something you just plug into every list. It has to kind of be tailored specifically around casting this ability.
I think in a vacuum, though, just looking at how it would work in a beast list, I do think it kind of has improved too. I would take the trade of the automatic wound. You know, you go under the assumption that it would wound anyway.
Yep.
If you were like, you know, a competitive player. And to me, the fearless over the +2 courage is huge because that was one of the weaknesses. If you're casting it on like a bat swarm, generally beasts have low courage, so even the +2 courage wasn't guaranteed. So I really like the fearless. It's gonna make things more consistent. I guess I'm afraid of the cast values because before,
Right.
yeah, Hondruzag on a 3+ was really nice. If it becomes a 4+, oh, that might be kind of tough.
What if they get a free will a turn, Richard? What
I'll
were you
take
thinking?
that trade. Yeah.
Yeah. If you could just generically put a caster in your list that could make your models gain fight value, strength, and attacks of +2 and fearless in order to take a wound, I mean, every list would take that. It's
Yes.
very powerful.
Yes.
I know low courage seems to be a common weakness for beasts. Maybe you be able to do some kind of combination to take advantage of the fearless.
Yeah, keep
Survival
Shelob from
stuff,
running
whatever.
or
Yeah.
survival instincts.
Yeah, depending on what's in the list. But yeah, it does sound like it's going to be situational and not very common in
It's
most
going to be like a defining spell for the Druzag list. And that is probably the only place we're going to see it, is my guess.
Yeah.
I want to put it in maybe the bottom of Valor, just because, yeah, I'm trying to balance it between it being vital to that list, but at the same time, overall in the game, you probably won't see it that often. So, like, the Blinding Light, Aura Command, and Fury are going to be more applicable to most armies. To me, like, if you can get the right situation, it's just better than anything in the Fortitude.
Yep, I totally agree with that. Man, they should have given this to Saruman so he can enrage the birds.
Crabwine from Dunland! Hide!
That would be so sick.
I'm not sure that army needs another buff.
The Air Force.
Yeah.
Fearless birds. No thanks. Next, we have the first new edition, new spell.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, you can sometimes tell that Games Workshop, when they make new things, they just really want everyone to play it. So they just make it way too powerful.
Sarcasm? Is that sarcasm?
And then the meta just has to adjust around it. And I think that's what's really happened with Fog of Disarray. It's like, my goodness, this is just, I was casting this again and again in my games, and it was just devastating.
So it's basically Aura of Dismay, but for intelligence.
Okay, so who has this?
Celeborn. You would only cast this if you were in a Fog of Disarray when you were choosing your spells. It is awful.
I mean, I can think of applications, okay, like before we totally throw it in the trash. Okay, obviously it's not that good, but we haven't gotten scenarios like seize the prize or depending on how they make like heirlooms or whatever. You know, those will require intelligence tests. And, you know, I can very much see like, you know, on those key turns, you throw one of these to lessen the chance. I think it's just right now, especially in these 6 scenarios, like there's literally no use for it. Okay, like maybe you can, if you're really afraid of a hurl, you chuck it on a monster, but yeah, otherwise,
should I transfix it or should I Fog of Disarray it? I don't.
Fog of Disarray is permanent, right?
Yeah,
Exhaustion.
that's true.
Yeah.
So
No.
maybe you cast it against Ents, right?
Yeah, Stephen, if you're playing against all eagles or all ents,
Eagles,
gonna
I'd
see a
still
difference.
transfix them, but Ents you can't transfix. So
Yeah.
Fog of Disarray is the tech.
You put it up at the beginning of the game, right? Because it's exhaustion.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, so just a minor correction. It's on Galadriel, not Celeborn. Celeborn does not
Oh,
have that broken spell.
thank you, Richard.
Yeah, no problem.
That's what I was doing wrong. I kept trying to cast it on the wrong guy.
Kind of situational. What else is intelligence used for? Like
The ring.
charging ring bearers, right?
Yep. You don't have any ring bearers in that list though, so
If
not
only,
a
wait, I don't think any of the Angmar has it, does it? Because
You think of comboing it with specters?
that might be the,
It's like a command, but you have to use 2 models to do it instead of 1, and you can't choose where they go.
and you have to be
Guys,
within,
this is accepted.
you
This
have
is
to
the
be
worst
within
one.
6, and then the Spectre can utilize their pull that is 12-inch range.
Yeah. You know, the only way that this really changes is if they make a scenario where there's a need for a lot of intelligence tests
Sauron has it.
to be done. Instead of Chill Soul, Fog of Disarray. I think there is a little bit in this edition where the spells that you cast for free, as in like before you get to combat and you're just setting up, it seems that they've nerfed those a fair amount. So this is probably in a lens of they're expecting you to have a turn or two with nothing to do with Galadriel on your current deployment, so it's kind of free.
So yes, I've confirmed the Shadow of Rudar does have it, so you can do the Spectre combos when you get up close.
Nice. Yeah, that's definitely what you should burn all your will on. Maybe heroic channel it.
Yeah, okay, Stephen. Okay, let's independent.
Bottom of independent.
I don't think it's
It doesn't
that.
even give me a fate. It doesn't even give me a fate, guys.
I don't think it's that bad.
I think it's better than Blessing.
It's comparable. I wouldn't be mad if you put it above Blessing.
Can it be decent on Shadow of Rudar? Okay, you cast it on a 3+, and then everyone gets -1 within 6, but then it's only within 6, right?
Correct. I mean, if you're taking like a spam of specters, then yeah, that can have value. Probably more value than restoring 1 fate.
Arguably
Curse?
better than Curse as well in that list.
Now you're going to anger everyone who loves Curse.
Viewers, let us know if you've pulled off a sneaky Fog of Disarray and it's won you
Guys,
again.
how highly do we rate Shadow over here? Fog of Disarray and Curse in the absolute bottom tier.
Next one we have is Foil Magic. This is another new spell. Basically, you target one enemy model within range, and then their exhaustion spell ends. So you can cancel someone's Fog of a Disarray to immediately end.
I can't believe they immediately made a spell to counter the other spell. It's just so brutal.
They had to, or else, it'd be too
To
strong.
balance it. So the meta could heal. This is kind of like their fix for removing sap will from the game, right? So that there can be abilities to drain out ongoing effects that people are casting.
Like Charles said in the beginning, these are all the spells in red, which includes Paralyze. We haven't gone to that yet, but that's a pretty big one. So
And Disrupting Fury could potentially be a very useful thing. However, there's not that many. I mean, this is kind of the definition of very situationally useful. I'd really like to have it against Paralyze. Maybe it would be decent to have it against Fury or Aura of Command. Don't really need it against anything else. And I mean, you'll just, unless your meta is all about Feral Whites, you just are not using the spell.
yeah, I agree.
I mean, I'd say most models that have Fury are minor casters with only like 3 will, 4 will, and so they wouldn't have a lot of resources to resist it. I can see it being really good in those situations. Probably just that and Paralyze, right? Like the other ones,
Yep.
probably pretty unlikely. Fortify Spirit, they're gonna have the extra dice to.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the best way to get rid of Fortify Spirit. Well, I guess if they don't Fortify Spirit themselves, maybe they can think about it. So for me, this is banishment tier.
Yeah. Will this anger people if I say it's worse than Collapse Rocks? Because now I'm thinking all the applications of Collapse Rocks.
The Rock still got it.
I think we spent so much time talking about Collapse Rocks that we need to improve its ranking because its popularity is really gonna go up. So yeah, I think we put Collapse Rocks ahead of it. Foil Magic is never gonna kill your opponent's models.
That's true.
Okay, next we have Fortify Spirit. This has been changed to just gaining 1 extra dice to resist instead of
Yeah.
2.
Does it stack
No.
with resistant to magic?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay, so you can still stack it. It's just 1.
And the difference between resistance to magic and the old Fortify Spirit is just huge mathematically, throwing 2 dice instead of 1. Like, this is still useful to have. Like, you'd be happy you have it if you're facing a heavy casting list, but you're still vulnerable. It's not like the old ones where you could make your troops just impossible to stop with magic. But I think that's fine because magic in general has been more nerfed. Realistically, though, with the way things will play out, more often than not, you're going to see heroic channel stuff get thrown your way. And so just adding a single dice from Fortify Spirit is not likely to stop a heroic channel spell. So I think it is measurably weaker than last edition.
Yeah, and plus the casting costs have gone up from 2+ to 3+ on White Council Galadriel and 4+ on Gandalf the White. So yeah, even like we said with the other 4+ spells, yes, you might have a couple turns to sit there casting before combat. Either you're spending more resources than you may want, or if you're one dicing it, you might not be able to cover all your heroes by the time combat hits.
For me, that I would have said Fortify Spirit last edition was a very powerful spell, and I would have ranked it accordingly. But here, I actually think it drops down to Fortitude for me.
It's still, at the end of the day, it's still an extra dice though, right? It's basically like a reroll on your resist.
Mm-hmm. So comparable to rerolls on wounding, or
I think if we want to put it in Fortitude, it's the bottom for me because the casting cost is just it's hard.
I'd agree with bottom of Fortitude.
Okay.
But I would much rather have it on my caster than Aura of Dismay or Drain Courage.
Next we have Instill Fear. Instill Fear has been changed. When you cast Instill Fear, every enemy model within 6 inches of the caster gains the Fearful special rule, which means that they need to make a courage test whenever they want to charge something.
It's almost like the old Aura of Dismay.
Does this cast on a 6 now?
I think it depends on who. I'm looking at Lady of Light right now, and she casts on a 4+.
And so this is a temporary spell. So like you were saying, it's basically an Aura of Dismay for a single time use. And Still Fear's a 5+ for Witchkin now. And it's a 6+ for Ring Wraiths.
It's good, but you're going to be casting this in place of something else, right? So is it so good that you would choose to cast this often?
I think there are situations where you would actually channel this to pop off, but that would be very matchup dependent and also situation dependent. But I can see it happening.
Yeah, if you're facing opponents that are soft to courage shenanigans and you think you can stop half of them from charging, I mean, that's a pretty good use of a might in a will if you have your Ring Wraith. Because I'm kind of envisioning the stronger casters, they probably have better things to do than blanket AoE CC. But if you have like a second Ring Wraith, I mean, that's a pretty good use of your might.
Maybe I'm missing something, but guys, let me know. When you're casting this, I'd assume that you're going first, right? So if you're going first, wouldn't you likely already be charging your enemies so you don't care if they're fearful or not?
Well, you would change the way that you charge if you know that they're going to be fearful. Or like you would maybe dogpile certain heroes or models and then hope that your opponent can charge back. But you're right that it would be more useful.
My point is just like it would be a very specific situation because you're likely going to be able to charge whoever you want.
Just to add on, if you're also calling channel, then they can counter with a move.
So clearly, you just need to call a move with one of your heroes outside of your own troops' range and then have them run up, cast Instill Fear, and then your opponent moves, can't charge, and then you charge them back. It's the perfect plan.
I said no!
Okay.
However, this is not a premier spell that I'm very excited to be using more. I would be way more excited at the 4+ level if you could take that in an army than the 5 or the 6. Once you get to 5 or 6 territory, you're not getting it off consistently that it would be worth it.
Yeah, I think you'll probably just see this mostly in the White Council because not only is it 4+, but now there's no the old Aura of Dismay. Then I guess this is kind of what maybe Galadriel does for most of her turns if she can't be banishing, against certain armies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see this being really annoying if you stack this with Aura of Dismay.
So where does that end up with this? I feel like either bottom of Fortitude or top of Minor.
I think it's right there. It's definitely better than Aura of Dismay because Aura of Dismay is almost like a buff to this spell.
Yep, this spell does something.
I'm okay putting in Fortitude behind Fortify Spirit, but
yeah, let's put
up
it
to
there.
you guys.
I'm good with that.
Okay, Nature's Wrath.
On our Discord, we've recently been talking about this a little bit because a really good player in North America and friend of the show, Jake DeLuey, has been playing a lot of Rivendell. And he quotes that Nature's Wrath is the best spell in the game now. I'm not sure I'm fully on board, but I have watched a couple of his games and he's done quite well with it. I think he recently as well won Swedish Open, I believe, or is it the Denmark Open? One of
Denmark. He was in Denmark.
Denmark Open, yeah, with basically double Nature's Wrath. So for sure, it's on the top half. Let's just say that it has its uses.
So, just a point of correction: you are talking about Wrath of Bruinen, right? Not Nature's Wrath.
Yes.
What an idiot!
So
Let's move that up to
gonna
talk
say.
about them together.
Okay, there we go. We can talk about them together. Great idea. But one of them is noticeably much better than the other one because Wrath of Bruinen does damage, strength 2 hits to everyone, and Nature's Wrath does not. If we're talking about both, which I think it's pretty fair to do, I think I'm kind of in agreement that Wrath of Bruinen is the best spell in the game at this point. This is a spell that was massively improved by Heroic Channeling because it only features in a couple models that only have a few will, and it generally had a pretty high casting cost, like at least a 4+. I mean, giant AoE disruptions that also do damage and also make it way easier to wound your opponent. I mean, you can just win the game immediately off of a single Wrath. I've been on the other side of that, and I've done it to other people. It's just a very strong ability.
Because Elrond went from maybe casting it twice successfully to now he can guarantee up to 3 times with the result of a 6, right?
Yep. And I can just speak from my own experience in tournaments. I have faced opponents who have used their Elrond's Might specifically just to heroic channel this spell 3 times. And that is a play people are making. And like you're saying with Jake, when you combine it with Arwen, who also has 2 points of might and 4 points of will, you can also cast the spell. I mean, you're pretty consistently casting this every single turn of the game.
And doing it twice a turn on the same area, if they do resist, it's an insane amount of pressure.
It's so strong. God forbid that they're in a water feature. They take strength 8 hits. I mean, then the game is just completely over. So if you're playing on the Lake Town board, oh my God, run in fear.
So do we agree with Jake? That is the best spell in the game.
When you talk about like a single spell that can just completely win you the game on a single cast, I mean, I don't think there's anything as impactful as Wrath of Bruinen right now. The fact that you have such a big AoE effect, your opponents can't strike back. I mean, you're quite frequently taking a lot of kills back for every single time you cast this. For me, it's the most powerful spell in the game. If you gave this to like something like Galadriel or Gandalf, I mean, that would be horrific.
Yeah, I do think it's up there. I think my only reservation is, I guess, compared to Compel or even like Chill Soul, there's probably a little less applications to use it in, like especially Compel, I think, where you're using it in sometimes non-combat situations. Whereas Wrath of Bruinen is like the enemy knows it's coming, they're gonna run in the middle of your line, knock you to the ground or attempt to, compel and chill soul. You could do some trickier things with it, but I guess, yeah, you make a good argument with saying that it probably has the largest single impact. And honestly, a 4+ cast is not that hard, even
No.
even without the channel.
And I would put Nature's Wrath obviously right behind Wrath of Bruinen for wherever it ends up. Basically the same effect, but you don't get the strength 2 hits.
No, I'm okay. I think Stephen has a good point. Yeah, I think it's just the crowd control effect versus a single target.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of AoE spells in the game in general, so
These spells both knock down monsters, right?
yeah.
Yeah, there's no strength restrictions. I mean, that's really powerful.
Yeah.
Richard, I think Cholso would be easy winner if it wasn't only on 200 point plus models.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think Sauron would be way scarier if he could cast Nature's Wrath than if he could cast Chill Soul.
Okay, so I guess we have Paralyze now, where formerly I think most of the community, or at least I've heard quite often before in the old edition, that this was the most powerful spell in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I would agree that it has been dethroned.
Yeah.
It was the most powerful spell in the game also because of the context of who had it and in what amount. The fact that you could take it on a barrel wipe, which was a hero of fortitude and cost 50 points and got so much will and got to cast it on a 4+. I mean, it was so powerful because you could just have so much of it for so free. If you took any of the top level spells and you put those on a barrel wipe, I mean, they would have been great.
Yeah, well, you can argue now it's on a 3+, and the barrel white has not changed in cost or will.
It's still very powerful, but the ability to might up Paralyze roll, that is a big difference because last edition, I often felt like if your hero was paralyzed, like it was dead. It didn't even matter if it actually died. Many times there wouldn't be enough turns in the game for you to actually recover your hero, especially if they were fighting and they couldn't get enough people into it. So you'd have like a 50-point model could just come in and wipe out your Aragorn incredibly easily. But now they can spend might to come back from it. That being said, I still think Paralyzed is ridiculously strong.
I think they also made it a little bit easier for friends to help a paralyzed model to wake up. It says that they just
It's,
have to be in base contact.
yeah, it's a
Yep.
lot easier.
So you
It's
can spear support them and help them up.
Being an
Yeah, this
exhaustion
is-
spell makes it like a little bit easier in certain situations to get rid of, I guess, if the Barrow White dies or runs out of will or gets casted by foil magic.
so I guess if effectively the barrel white has one less will because you can't go
Yeah.
down to 0.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I went to a 3+ cast, but lost the will.
And I guess the way it's worded, it seems like not just spear supports, right? I think you can even fight in a combat and still attempt to
It's just
wake them
at
up.
the end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
as long as they're base contact. So that's a lot easier to pull off.
Still probably the strongest single target controlling spell in the game.
I'm gonna start by saying I think it's still in Legend. I don't think it's the best spell anymore, but with the nerf to Compel, I think this just stands out as like the one that neutralizes heroes.
I think I would also put it above Chill Soul just because the casting values, purely because of that.
I 100% agree. And the opportunity cost, I mean, you get it on a 50-point model
Yeah,
as opposed
still
to a
50
400-point
points.
model. Yep, it's still really good. I mean, the real nerf to this is that you can't take it in the Angmar lists with Witch King and Gullivar anymore. That's the real nerf here. It's very strong.
I almost want to put it above Nature's Wrath. I think all the top 3 are really close. So I think,
Yep.
yeah, of course the top 2 are like the AoE spells, but Paralyze is devastating still, like on a single target. I just think they're extremely close.
Very close. They're all god tier.
Before it was kind of a tier of its own, right? But I wouldn't be opposed to moving it up even.
That's fine. Yeah, we can move it above Nature's Wrath. Also, kind of emphasizes how Wrath is better than Nature's Wrath.
Now we have Panic Steed, and I think this one is the same.
The change to Panic Steed is that they can now resist it.
Mm. And did the casting change? Was it not on a 2+ before?
Yes.
It's a 3+ now, so slightly worse here.
That being said, like basically the first thing that I look for in a caster is the ability to dismount a hero. Because that is super, super strong to do if you're doing magic and controlling your opponent. This is probably like the worst way to do it, in that it doesn't have other utility beyond just doing that. But this is still something that will be very useful in a lot of matchups. Like you're spamming this against any big mounted hero until he loses his steed.
The downside, though, is we're seeing more all-foot armies. So it's completely useless against all-foot armies.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a tough one because I would probably put in the fortitude range. When there is uses, it's quite good. But yeah, this is kind of hard to place because when you're trying to dismount a big hero, it's better than a Flameburst or a Black Dart. But
Does have more utility.
yeah, those have more utility. So
Yeah, put it in between Flameburst and Black Dart. I like that.
Protection of the Valar. This is the one Gandalf the Grey has. And it's slightly different. So before it was that the target that you cast it on can't be targeted by magical powers or special rules that target a model. So that part is still the same. But then they added a portion, they added an extra rule where any models that shoot it will also get a -1 to hit, similar to in Elven Cloak.
It is better, but I feel like this is one of those spells that seems better than it really is because you have to do this before they target you, right?
Yes.
So you have to be a situation where your opponent has casting or an ability that controls one of your heroes that they want to cast on a different hero besides Gandalf, who's probably your most expensive model. And then you have to successfully cast this, and then they can still choose to then cast on something else. So you end up in a situation where you're trading the turn of a very expensive hero to do this, and then they still get to do something else. Like in sometimes that inefficiency is worth it if the ability is so scary that you're gonna lose your other hero. Like you absolutely need a get out of jail card. But the general setup is inefficient and requires you to go first to get it to go off.
yeah. And the tack on bonus with the -1 to shooting, I mean, it's on Gandalf who has blinding light, right? So yeah,
Cast blinding light. Right.
yeah, so that's again, yeah, I think you make a good point. It looks better on paper.
Yeah.
Because when you read this, you feel like, oh, Gandalf just makes one of your guys invulnerable for a turn. No, it doesn't. You have to walk through a lot of hoops, and it's only on expensive stuff. You'd think about this differently if it was on like a Stormcaller or something like that, something cheap that you can put in to support a bigger hero. But the fact that it's likely on your biggest hero makes it a lot weaker too.
Yeah, that's a good point. You want it being cast on Gandalf, not casting on himself, which then he can't cast anything else.
Yeah.
So, is this a meme or
I mean, I've thought about casting this many times, but then I've never actually cast it because I'm just thinking, well, I can protect Aragorn, but then they're just gonna go after Frodo, or they're just gonna go after Bard or whoever else is in your army.
Yeah. I think it's better than the three we have in Independent, but I feel like it's weaker than the other ones we have in Minor.
I think it's better than Blessing.
It's definitely better than Blessing. I can think of more utility than Fog because it also stops special rules that target a model. So those are more prevalent than just spells. It means you generally will have a target. But
Okay, maybe if there's a situation where there's clearly one target, like let's say that target has your heirloom, or that's like you're playing like a
yeah,
contest of champions, and that's your leader, then
yep, or Fog and you're trying to protect it. So I guess that kind of maybe puts it more in foil magic territory and less of Fog of Disarray territory.
Yeah.
I put it at bottom of minor though.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then we have Renew. So the target that you cast it on regains 1 wound, and then if it's a cav model, you choose Rider or the Mount.
Wow, strictly better version of Blessing of Valor.
So strong.
Oh, it's not broken. It is.
I mean, if Renew restored the VPs that you lost for wounds to your leader, it would have a use. That is no longer the case. So for me, this is kind of a meme spell. Better than Blessing of Valor, but that's probably it.
I mean, you could probably still save your general, but yeah, I guess the difference between like the general about to die on like 1 wound versus 2 wounds, and he's like surrounded.
And your caster is going for the Hail Mary Renew to save them. It's uh-oh.
Yeah.
Not a great line.
I think the only application is like when you are playing one of those hero hammer styles where you have multiple casters, multiple like hitters, like a white council type, and you
Yep.
just you have enough other things to do other stuff that you're like, okay, what's this last caster gonna do? Oh, okay, I'm gonna heal a wound.
This was actually a usable ability in Vanquishers back in the previous edition, and you would see it there, but I've never seen anyone cast it besides there.
I agree with Richard. In hero heavy lists, a big hero holding an objective, the difference of 1 wound can mean they hold the objective for an extra turn, right?
So I think similar to Protection of the Valor range.
I think slightly better because you're not doing it before your enemy does something. You can do it after the fact, like after they've already been wounded the turn before.
Okay, well, it's definitely below Collapse Rocks.
Definitely below Collapse Rocks. The sleeper hit of the new.
People just don't know yet.
They'll know after this. The tech is going to be out.
Maybe below Foil Magic too.
I'd put below Foil Magic. I'd much more care about getting rid of Paralyze than healing a wound.
Now we have Sorcerous Blast.
Controversial one.
Is it?
Oh, we'll see. I've seen a lot of people casting Sorcerous Blast. It's not very good.
So you used to use this spell to knock a whole bunch of models over, and it can be really annoying blasting into combat, blasting at models in combat. And now it's a lot more limited.
I mean, you can still pull off the trick where you charge a hero and a guy, like two enemy models, one hero, one warrior, and then you can still blast the warrior to knock everyone prone. So that trick still works. Aside from that, it's not very
If they're
easy.
strength 5 or lower. So you can't even do the shenanigans that you used to be able to do where you would blast them into the other combat, and then it could knock down them regardless of their strength size.
No.
It also doesn't knock the target back anymore.
It used to be like a top 3 spell in the game, but yeah, not anymore.
And the casting values are awful now. Very hard to cast.
It was like one of the best ways to dismount a hero before, right? You blast a warrior into a hero that's mounted.
Yeah, it was near impossible to stop. I mean, I can understand why you still see Sorcerer's Blast. You probably shouldn't see it as much. Maybe people are just used to it being very, very good.
Well, specifically in Saruman, it's just so much worse now because he doesn't get to reroll the cast, and now it's a 5+. Because to consistently get off a 5+ spell, like you gotta throw 2 to 3 will at it. And these are guys that get 1 will a turn plus a minor store. So you really can only cast it really a couple times a game. And at a certain point, you do have to think about, you have 1 point of will. Should you spend it on a Transfix or Compel it on a 3+, or should you spend it on a Sorcerous Blast on a 5+? And I think before, I mean, with a hero like Saruman, you were just going away with your reroll, 4+ Sorcerous Blast with all the effects. You just bam, bam, bam. That was the default choice, no matter what. But now it's like, now you have to consider maybe going for consistently getting off 2 Sorcerous Blasts a game or something like that, or heroic channeling your Sorcerous Blast.
I still think early on in the game, when you do have those resources, let's say you're facing a big mounted hitter and they just get into your lines. That first turn, a Sorcerer's Blast channeled is much better than like a Transfix going off.
Yeah.
Because you just get the value from the horse too, right? So Yeah,
So I guess this is the default channeled spell for these casters because it's on a 5+, so you get maximum value by channeling it. In a hero like Saruman or Gandalf the Grey, for example, you are pretty likely to channel, I think,
yeah.
at least a couple times a game. So you probably are casting this a couple times a game, channeled, and that's still good.
Hmm. I mean, if you take a horse, that's already good enough value for the channel.
Mhm. Yep, definitely.
Good enough to be Valor?
I think so.
Yeah, I'd say it's good enough to be Valor. It is much better than Flameburst and Black Dart for me. The fact that you knock them prone if it goes off and you don't have to wound them out is significantly better.
Maybe after blinding light.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Now we have Strength and Will. No, it's still the same. The target regains a single will spent earlier in the battle. And then also, if it's a cav model, you choose the rider or the mount. So you're spending will for a chance to restore friendly models' will.
And this is a 4+. Ugh. You're spending a will to 50-50, getting a will. And you're taking it from your caster to give it to someone else. Uh,
I mean,
it's not adding up for me.
to be fair, there are models in the game where they burn will to give special abilities. Uh,
Mhm.
Models like Alfred, I know he's horrible now, but he's an example. So I guess if you can find the value there, then you can argue that a lot of the times those engines are much more valuable than the will on Gandalf, who gets one a turn. But yes, it's still kind of a meme. You build around it to have like a really cheesy army. You're gonna have fun with it, but it's not gonna be very good.
Is the best use of this right now? Like you can't even do alliances anymore, but like would be powering up a Wrath of Bruinen, I guess, because that's gated behind Will pretty extreme. It's just really hard to make this worth it, especially the fact that you can't even ally to get those shenanigans, Richard, that you're talking about. Like you're stuck with the Fellowship list or your Survivors list or your Hammer or Top of the Wall for Gandalf.
Yeah. So maybe if you're playing like Fellowship and Boromir uses his one will store that he starts with, and you want him to be able to resist a spell.
It's Fortify Spirit at home.
And that's one turn that Gandalf isn't casting any of his other spells, right? He could be collapsing rocks.
It could be collapsing rocks, and it's on a 4+, so like it's gonna fail.
It's got independent energy to me.
Yeah, I think it's really weak, but better than Blessing of the Valor. Everything is better than Blessing of the Valor.
Is it better than Curse?
It might be better than Curse. Yeah, because I'm thinking of like giving Aragorn another will, and I'm like, okay, Aragorn can use another point of will.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Maybe even ahead of Disarray.
I'm not a fan of Disarray, so I'm not going to disagree with you. I think that spell is currently useless, and the fact that it's where it is us assuming that it will have a use at some point.
Yeah.
Stephen has a good point, though. Without soups being a thing, those synergies that you had before where you could do it, I don't know how many of those are still possible.
I think there's some in Battle 5 armies where some of the dwarves have some will spending special rules.
Mhm.
Thorin's Company shenanigans.
Okay, viewers, let us know what you think of our independent rankings. Would you put Strength and Will first? Next, we have Terrifying Aura. And it's still the same where once cast, the caster gains terror.
I think
I mean, this is like the prototypical, hey, I have nothing to do on the first turn. Terrifying aura. So you see it cast a lot, but is that a high impact? No. If you had anything else to do, you would probably not do this.
yeah, it's pretty mid. I think maybe above Instill Fear in the Fortitude.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because I think you do cast Fortify Spirit ahead of that.
Yes, I'd be way more excited for Fortify Spirit.
Okay.
Okay.
Transfix.
I mean, it's still really good. You still will cast it a lot. It still will kill heroes. I mean, this is like a premier way to kill heroes. They get transfixed, they can't strike, and they die. I've killed so many heroes with this spell. And that's fair.
So I think the hard question for me is, it was no question before Compel versus Transfix, but now there's an argument, right? It's not as flexible as Compel, and it's probably a lower skill ceiling, but who cares? Because any player who picks up this game can spam this spell and be kind of scary with it.
You also see it on more heroes, right? You see transfixes, it's more common.
This to me is like this is the premier spell of MESBG. This is what it means to be a caster. This is what the expensive casters get. This is what they do. They transfix. And that's always been the case. I now rate it above Compel because I think it has more killing potential and it just makes your opponent more helpless than Compel does due to the change. But they're two sides of the same coin. They would be next to each other in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stephen, but I'm also thinking it might actually be better than a Chill Soul. It's a little bit controversial, it may be, but I'm just thinking with Chill Soul, yes, the raw killing power on warriors, and also, yeah, you can ping heroes. But if it's a big 3 wound, 3 fate hero, a lot of the times, even Sauron might not be able to like ping down a hero with just Chill Soul in a
Yep.
single game, right? Whereas Transfix does give you the tools to flash kill a hero.
I mean, if Sauron's fighting a hero, he's probably not Chill Souling. He's probably transfixing them, which is a pretty strong argument for transfix. Like if he's scared of them at all.
And you can even argue as they're approaching, it's not necessarily a bad play. Instead of chill souling stuff, you're transfixing the big hero to make them out of position as well. So
I'm convinced. I think transfix goes ahead of Chill Soul.
Okay, so next we have Tremor. So Tremor has changed a little bit. It's now more consistent in its distance. So before it was D6 inches, now it's D3 plus 3. And the strength 6 is now strength 4. So it does a line damage, strength 4.
that's pretty big.
Strength 6 is way better than Strength 4, but it does still knock prone.
Yeah.
This is a little tricky because no models have Tremor yet.
Oh, and they also added that flying models can never be targeted.
So Heroic Channel is going to be very good for this spell. Like any of the small casters that have some points of might that have really expensive spells get really buffed by that change. So like Borgir, for example, if he still has 2 points of might, like you're very likely, I think, to see 2 channeled tremors. Going down from strength 6 to strength 4 is big, but the consistency of the direction is also big. This is not nearly as one-sided as Wrath of Bruinen and Nature's Wrath are, but it is still one of the few premier AoE effects that does this.
I mean, likely it's going to be a harder cast than Wrath, the Bruinen that is. So I think I would probably place this after Wrath of Bruinen, but before Nature's Wrath.
I think I agree with that. Yeah, I think this is crazy good.
One of the things that you had to always be careful of for Tremor is what friendly models it hit because it hits friendlies. So going down to strength 4, and then let's say you're an Easterling army, that's a big difference, right? You're probably going to be more okay with casting into your own combats.
Also, did Tremor in the last edition, did it just knock down the people that were engaged in combat but not in the line? Because now they take the damage, right? They're targeted.
Every combat that's in that line
now takes strength 4 hits.
So before they hit they get the damage too. Before.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of damage here. This is a premier ability. It's very powerful. For me, this is just right behind Paralyze. I think it is a top 3 spell.
It's interesting because 1 or 2 times where I use a spell, the one thing I didn't love about it is so you roll the distance first, so you don't off the bat know exactly who can resist, right? Because it's any model that is in that line. Yeah, other than that, I think it's great. I think it would be in Legend. I wouldn't rate it as high as Steven. I've never used Borgir. I've just had them on Black Shield Shamans, which it wasn't as consistent with only the 3 will. So maybe my experience with this spell isn't as consistent as his, but I would probably say somewhere in the bottom of Legend. I guess it all depends on what kind of heroes get it.
Yeah, I think I'm ranking it actually higher than previous edition because of the Heroic Channel. I think my experience with Heroic Channel so far is you can go after heroes with 2 will or less pretty consistently with Heroic Channel, and it is a big problem to try to get that 6. So the difference between a 5 and a 6 is really big. Guaranteeing a 6 with the Tremor and going after a hero, like they'll probably end up spending either more resources than you did, or they're just going to get blasted. So I do think it is buffed pretty significantly in that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I do like the utility more than Nature's Wrath, but Nature's Wrath can be a little easier to use because it doesn't hit friendlies, doesn't affect friendlies.
I do think that's why it's above Nature's Wrath, but below Wrath, because Wrath gives damage as well, but it's one-sided, right? So
Yep. But Tremor's better if you're trying to kill yourself to end the game.
it's true.
So.
They're trying to discourage that, Stephen. Did you not read page 15, the rules of conduct?
Well, we'll see.
Now we have Wither. So it still has the reduced strength value by 1, like last edition, but now if you get a hero or get a model down to 0 strength, then they die.
So I think a lot of our comments about Drain Courage are relevant here, with the caveat that it is much more valuable to lower strength than it is to lower courage. So you have the same problems where you need to cast it multiple times to try to get value out of it, probably. But lowering strength immediately has a big effect on the power of the hero. So you're probably not getting heroes down to 0 ever. I don't really see that happening. But taking a hero from strength 4 to strength 3, if you're like a D6 army, is big game. Or taking it down to strength 2. There's like break points where this is very useful. I think the key to this spell being good is, can you cast it once and have it resolved and have that be good? And I think sometimes, yes, that is the case for the spell.
It's definitely better than Drain Courage. I think most times, to your point, would be useful. From what I've seen, the casters that are casting Wither are generally smaller. So I think you brought up that point before, that having it on a smaller caster it's just more cost effective. It's probably in Fortitude.
Yeah. I'm just
Yeah,
thinking I'm just
Good.
thinking the new portion where Steven said that you'll probably never get it down to 0. I think even if that's the case, your opponent might still be thinking about it, right? They might not even be using their hero strength, but they might still want to resist it. Like if you're casting it on their legless, who's just sitting in the back shooting, they're gonna have to save some resources to deal with it once he gets down to like strength 2, strength 1.
The legless is probably the worst person you could target with this. Just gonna shoot him with his bow.
Maybe not the best example, but just.
But yes, like a
Saying
cast.
that, yeah, they have to prepare to deal with it at some point, whereas before they didn't. Like legless can be strength 1, strength 0, and it wouldn't really matter.
So the caveat to this to consider is it's a 5+ on the shadow, who does not have heroic channel, which you're probably only casting that once, maybe twice.
Mhm.
And then it's on the necromancer, who's probably also not casting this spell. And then it's on the Angmar shaman, who you probably shouldn't be taking.
That's the best spell that he has.
That is the best spell he has. Yes. So its best use is probably on the Angmar Orc Shaman to channel one time and then to throw it at a 4+. So he's getting it off twice, realistically. So from all of the casters, you're paying a fair amount of points to cast this probably twice.
Yeah, so essentially it's not a real strategy unless you want to make a meme list where you take
The necromancer's just spamming it, or you've got a lot of Angmar Orc Shamans. I still rate it above
Instill Fear.
Fortify Spirit, Terrifying Aura, and Instill Fear. Because I think taking a 50-point model, taking a big hero from strength 4 to strength 3, and maybe down to strength 2, that's a big control. That's a nice exchange of resources.
Yep.
Man, are we just tearing Shadow of Rudar apart here? All of his spells.
Next, we have Writhing Vines. This is the final new spell that we're going to talk about.
And the best one.
Yes.
Yeah. So you basically place a 25 millimeter marker wholly within 3 inches of the caster who casts it, and then enemies treat the area within 3 of this marker as difficult terrain for the rest of the turn.
Yeah, so right now it's only on Celeborn. I like it.
Radagast has it.
Okay. The applications seem pretty decent. I know it's probably going to be the most used against cav armies where it's super useful, but
Yeah.
against flyers would be kind of nice.
So to explain to anyone who isn't caught up on the tech for Writhing Vines, so because Writhing Vines creates difficult terrain, if cavalry are in combat in difficult terrain, they lose their cav bonuses. So they don't get that extra attack and they're not knocking you to the ground.
Yeah, and
So,
they're down to they're still down to quarter movement.
yep. But if your opponent charges you with a bunch of cav, you can run Celeborn in and then just nullify all of those abilities in response and really stave off a cav charge. It's brutal.
Let's say you act first and you put the marker in the middle of, let's say, a mounted hero. I don't believe they have the movement to even get out of there to charge. So it's kind of effectively another transfix as well, AoE transfix almost.
I had an interesting corner case with this in a tournament game where my opponent had an Isildur with the ring on, so you can't target him with spells, but I could Writhing Vines him so that he couldn't heroic combat and go where he wanted to go. You could just throw it down there and he couldn't move. So we were playing Reconnoiter and he was trying to run to the edge. No, Writhing Vines. So there's tricky little plays that you can do with this too, where your opponent thinks that perhaps they can come in on the flank or get a hero in a certain place, and then they can't. So it's one of those spells that really it hits above its weight because it doesn't look like it does that much. It's not wounding anything. It's not transfixing, but it's got a really flexible application that can cause your opponents to miss stuff that you can then get them with.
I think the only limitation here is that it's basically 3 inches from the caster. Okay, so it's a little better on Radagast, but with Celeborn on foot, you might not be able to get to the most optimal location. But where do you think you would put it, Stephen?
This is a sneaky bottom of Valor for me. Well, first of all, there tends to be cap models in a lot of lists right now. Just the armies that we have and heroes still taking a lot of forces. You get a lot of control from this, and they can't resist this because it's being cast on Celeborn. That's something very important. Keep in mind. So it gives you really good control. But then you get corner cases without cav models that are still useful from the difficult terrain. So I think you end up, if you're playing against a good opponent, they'll have to at least consider the casting of this spell on almost every turn.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Bottom of Valor.
Yeah, that looks good to me.
It is a 5+ cast on Radagast though, so it's definitely easier to pull off with Celeborn. But
that's funny.
Yeah,
Radagast is a 5 and Celeborn's a 4.
Okay, finally we have your staff is broken. Yeah, so as the spell is titled, you remove an opponent's staff.
Yeah, so I guess very, very good when the matchup arises, but it's so niche, arguably even more so now. Actually, I don't know. With the buffs to Gandalf, maybe you will see him a bit more. To me, it's like on the levels of Banishment or around.
I was just thinking, this is basically Banishment. Like every time you see this, it's like Witch King versus Gandalf, and one is banishing and one is staff is broken. It's like it's something that the other caster needs to resist, but you only ever cast it when it's these great wizard duels, which are not that often.
I mean, Saruman has become more popular with the Army of the White Hand and Muster of Isengard.
What I've seen so far, I've seen more staffs than I've seen spirits, to be honest. Because Banishment is most powerful against ring wraiths because it just kills them so that they leave. And I haven't seen many ring wraiths right now.
The few times I've come up against Gandalf the White or Gandalf the Gray, I have done it to just put on a lot of pressure with the Witch King because they're going to try to resist it, and oftentimes with 3 or 4 dice. So
yep, it's the wizard stool. I have used it for the wizard stool.
Yeah, I would be okay with putting it maybe a little bit behind Banishment because Banishment actually has uses against spirit armies or certain spirit heroes. It has a little more scenarios on its useful list.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
they're roughly the same tier. I do. I don't particularly care which one is where, as long as they're both in the middle of minor.
You might care because Collapse Rocks is right behind Banishment.
If only the rocks could break the staff by collapsing on it.
So it's the ranking that we have for all of the magical powers. Just want to shout out our patrons over on Patreon. Thank you all for supporting us. If you want to see extra content and check out our list of perks, please see the link in the description. A special shout out to Ragin Ridge 83, the top supporter of the channel. Also, we have a Patreon promotion going on right now. All patrons, after supporting us for 1 month, you get a set of custom Baron of dice that has the Into the West symbol on them. So for more information on how to get them, also you could see more in our description. And just to shout out Baron of Dice, they make some great Middle-earth strategy battle game dice, as well as dice for other games. You can use our promo code WEST for 5% off your order. I also want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Mithril Brush, who is a online painting competition dedicated to Middle-earth. You can find more information on their Instagram to support the competition or enter yourself. We'll also be doing a giveaway for all our patrons who've entered into Mithril Brush by the end of the year, so please go check it out on our Patreon. Viewers, let us know what you think of the rankings and let us know which spells you consider to be the best and worst of this edition. Thank you, Stephen, for coming on as a guest and helping us with this tier list, and we'll see you all next time.